And last but certainly not least, let's look back at what is arguably the most ambitious film in Christopher Nolan's filmography. That would be 2014's Interstellar. It's interesting that we talked about this now, right? And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, right? Because this year he won Best Director and Best Picture for Oppenheimer, right? So at the moment, he is in the GOAT level right now, right? He's one of the greats right now, right? But I would say with this film Interstellar, right, 10 years ago, this was where he was, where he made the attempt to reach that level, right? Where he wanted to reach, I would say, Stanley Kubrick level. That was it. He wanted to reach God mode, in my opinion, right? So that's what it was. He was trying to reach up there. Right? So
because like at this point he got his it's his first carte blanche project, which is Inception.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I want to say it's his first, right? I want to say that, right?
I would agree with that. I would agree.
I can't say Prestige is. I can't say Prestige.
Yeah, well, Prestige was a book.
Prestige was a book. Okay.
I talk about like your truly original thing. Yeah, I think right. And so he really got that point. And then Darkness Rises came and went, and I was not the biggest fan of that.
Right. I still love it, but as flawed as it is, I still enjoyed it.
It was deeply flawed, like whatever.
Yeah.
Then this came out, and I was like, he doing the Kubrick thing. Let me see him. And he's one person that could like pull off the hard science with a sci-fi movie. And we're going to put that word hard in quotes there, right?
But I can't wait to talk about that. I cannot.
But this was a period where they started really doing like patient in with IMAX, because around this time a little thing called Gravity came out, and it was kind of brilliant.
Loved it.
Kind of hard. And they started just doing this stuff in IMAX. And that's the thing with this movie. Straight up, I will just say you kind of have to see this movie in IMAX.
Agreed.
In my humble opinion.
Yep.
And I did.
Me too.
Wow. I went to see this movie in IMAX when it came out. So I was
Me too.
Wow. I think it was more or less opening day or the second day or something like that. And I just find myself in town and then take that in. And I was very impressed. Very, very impressed with this movie from that technical standpoint, because it just looked so good in IMAX too. But when I actually started thinking about the plot, like, and this movie,
we're gonna debate that. Yeah,
and then this movie is probably, I think this movie is the source of probably the most toxic online discussion about the nature of the movie, because that is frequent, like one of these, fiction movies things, and it was the most toxic bullshit ever, because like defending the movie, and it's like, but the movie ain't explaining, man. I know Nolan is your boy, but like, come on, like it wasn't that clear now. And I think I was ultimately validated with that. You know why I was validated with that? Because Nolan made another movie involving time shenanigans, and it addressed one of the big problems I had with this movie. So that means I think Nolan thought about it. It's the same attitude I had with Lindelof and Lost, right? Hate Lost ending, but love the Leftovers. And Leftovers is exactly addressed the problem I had with Lost. Same thing with this. Tenet. Right? As Tenet is worse than this, let's be clear.
Okay.
I need to rewatch Tenet. I need to rewatch it. I feel like if I watch it one more time, I'll like it more.
Tenet addresses a problem I had with this film, right? With that, right? And then, the movie is a movie that what I'll say with this movie is that it have, in my humble opinion, has its highest highs, but it also has his lowest lows. Right? It's a very deeply uneven movie in that way. And I can tell you the exact point, and I think all of us will agree that the exact point in the movie when that happens. Right?
I don't know.
And then leading up to that, I had a couple like little nitpicks with the plot, but I wasn't like a big deal. Like it's like whatever. You could fix that in the scripting. But I have to borrow from somebody who I think kind of nailed it with their review back when they did it. This guy, Martin Thomas from Double Toasted. He said, his point was that the film is not a failing in editing, even though the movie is too long in the edit. It's not the edit is the problem. It was in the scripting.
Yes.
And you had to cut that down there. And that is where and I completely agree with that. If you could have chipped down and then chip away why the movie was the way it was, and then the ending, and especially the ending, right? And that ending, it is a frustrating ending. But as I said, a little nitpicky and tweaks here or there, kind of fix it with that as it is. And I have a big plot thing I felt they should have done, but I just my fanboy bullshit, right? But I don't know. This movie is a fascinating kind of artifact of history, and I want to get into something deeper with this movie, like something that this movie was. And I get the feeling why it is that so many Nolan fanboys think, and I'm gonna just kind of lay my cards on the table now with this. Christopher Nolan has roughly the same problem that Zack Snyder has, right? When it comes to his fans. Where he himself, I don't know what his politics is, or anything like that. I don't know how he does lean. I have my own kind of speculation about that. But the aesthetic of its films always frames as kind of right wingy, but a smarter right wing. Much like how Snyder does.
The intellectual conservative.
Right, but in the case of Snyder is just blatant, and a lot of people think it's just kind of a little fashy. I admit that. But the new classical aesthetic, right? Like, let's call it that. I don't want to go as calling anybody fashion or anything like that, but there's a new classical aesthetic with that. And with Nolan, it's this kind of, and around this time, certain weirdness was happening in the political sphere, but this movie, it felt very, and there's a term I was popular at the time. I'm not sure if anybody's used the term anymore, but this was kind of the popular term that this movie represented, what I call metamodernism. Right, that's what it's known as, right? I wrote a paper on this, actually. But the metamodernist movement was kind of sticking around, and the idea is that, these religious people kind of dumb, but, these leftists, they're wrong too, but here's our way to carve a pathway through all of this kind of attitude. And then when they actually, start to talk to some of these people, they realize, all right, it's just a bunch of, just really smart, scientifically bent Catholics. That's what it feel like. And I make a joke about this, that how these dudes in about 40 years gonna probably make Vatican III happen or something like that, right? Spoilers for one of my books. But yeah, it's that. And that's how I felt about this movie. It's a strange artifact of his career. And all I'll say is that as the movie goes, it just felt like a script. They could have tweaked the script. Couple of tweaks. When we get to this part, guys, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about characters that I felt were squandered and what could have been done, how they could have do this, that, and the other, and whatever, normal thing. But yeah, it is easily. I don't think it's my favorite of his. That goes to the Prestige, actually.
Wow.
That's my personal
Prestige
favorite
respect.
of his.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that's my personal favorite of his. But I rate for me, other than Dark Knight and Inception, it's this, and then Memento. This was just really frustrating. I really felt it's a slightly underbaked masterpiece. That's what I'll call it, right? Deeply flawed masterpiece. When you talk about noble failures, this was the noblest of the failures, in a sense. And that's how I kind of feel about it. That's just my lead into it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Ricardo, you mentioned about seeing it in IMAX, right? So yes, I saw it for the first time in IMAX as well. I went to see it again actually in Movie Town, right? Just me and a friend of mine, we went to see it, right? And there's a specific moment, and I'll bring this up too, right? And I think this is where things start falling apart, or at least you see it right as day, right? Yeah, and I'll never forget her saying, I don't like that. When we get to that, that moment we'll talk about, right? But yeah, I was on the Nolan hype train for a long while, right? When I was introduced to the film Memento, and I was just showing it off to my friends, oh, it's Memento, and non-linear narratives, and time and shit. It's amazing, right? You know what I mean? And then, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy blew me away. Even Rises, which I still defend and I still have up there as one of my favorite films from him, right? But for me, when it was the two-punch combo of The Dark Knight and Inception. That was when I was like, all right, this guy is one of my favorite directors right now. In Inception,
but for me, it was Batman Begins, then Prestige.
Prestige, yes.
And I was like, oh, this guy did Batman, because I didn't know him since Memento.
Okay.
I was largely introduced to him through Batman. This man did real hard grounded Batman movie to it. And then I look back and I was like, oh, right, shit, this guy did the Memento movie. See. And then Prestige came in and blew me away. And I'm like, wow, that was like kind of amazing though.
Yeah, I love Prestige as well too. Well, I didn't mention.
Yeah, and then
really
right after Dark Knight come and just drop like a nuke on Hollywood, Judd, and it's like, all right, Judd, this man is a Judd. And yeah, well, Inception. Yeah, go ahead now.
Yeah. So, Inception, surprise, one of my top 10 favorite movies of the past decade. And it's so funny that, in the same year, right after Dark Knight Rises, right, which, yes, at the time, I picked as my favorite film of 2012. Yes, I will look back and smack myself in the head. It's like, Avengers came on the same year too, But it was a toss-up. And I picked that one, right? But whatever. I love both films anyway, right? 2013 was the year of Gravity, boy. And seeing that in IMAX blew my mind. Right. That was my favorite film in 2013.
Quick question, Matthew. Did we see it together in IMAX? I believe we did.
I think so, yes. Yes, we did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
We did. I remember that. Okay.
But when Interstellar was coming out now, I was like, okay, so we doing the whole IMAX space travel thing, as you mentioned before, Ricardo, right? But one thing about, here's the funny thing about both films, right? So Gravity just works as this solid survival thriller, right? You don't have to know about the logistics of space travel and all that kind of stuff. It's just you're alone. It's basically like Lifeboat, or, the movie, right? The Alfred Hitchcock film, right? Or just being trapped in the ocean or in the jungle or whatever it is, right? It's survival and trying to get back home, right? So it was just. It was just straightforward with the narrative, but it's just how it was built around just these fantastic visuals that work, right? This one, what really impressed me about Interstellar is that Nolan say, here's what. I know that I would say 3/4 of the audience not gonna understand a single thing that we're gonna say about space travel and black holes and all these kind of things, but I want it so believable that even the sci-fi nerds and the science nerds, and I'm glad that you here, Ricardo, so you could tell me what moments are true and what aren't. Yeah, they could be like, yep, that's true, that's correct, that's how black holes work, yep, and all these kind of things. Yes, they will have to embellish certain things, and yes, they will have to make things a little fantastical. But yeah,
they got kept on.
Yeah, they got kept on to be a physicist. To be the consultant for this film.
Consultant. So you can't get more better than that.
Yeah, so that still amazes me, that Nolan say here's what in this big budget movie, right? And another thing I love too is how he was honing that big budget filmmaking craft from since Batman Begins, right? And continuing on with Prestige and Dark Knight and all that kind of stuff, right? Saying here's what, this is still going to be a big budget movie, and we're still going to bring in people, and we're still going to sell popcorn and put butts and seat and whatnot, right? But we still giving you a lot of science thread, and I know that going to be a lot for people to understand. But this is what I'm doing, right? I want this thing to feel as real as possible, right? Another thing I should mention too, even though I didn't see this in IMAX, and I don't think it was in IMAX, right? It's so funny, right? Again, this I don't know, it was just this kick of space movies, right? So the following year, we will get The Martian.
Right.
Another movie where people have to go rescue Matt Damon.
Yes. And even in that film, there was a lot of scientific facts and, talk there. But
for the most part, hard science. I mean, you still have to embellish here or there for certain things, like, all right, that won't happen, man. Potatoes might not grow that way, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, they nailed it.
Yeah.
Like, that guy, his next book coming out, what's his name?
Andy Weir.
His next thing is coming out, and that like this dude is the real deal when it comes to giving us. So I'm super excited for that.
All right, well, thanks for your heads up.
I think it's ready books. Doing it, I think.
Okay. Or you mean that film that Bong Hong, I forget his name, Boon. Okay, a butchering name, right? Yeah, him, right? That's the film you're talking about, or some new?
No. He has a new book coming out, but then also there's a new adaptation of one of his other books called Project Hail Mary that Phil.
Right, that's the second week. Yeah, that's the second.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, but that all goes to show how unfamiliar I am with his work, right? But yeah, I'm a wrap up because we haven't heard CC's introduction to this review here, right?
Oh Lord.
But yes,
and we got a decade of good space stuff this year. Like, so we got the criminally underrated First Man, which I absolutely loved. And then also kind of underrated Ad Astra, right?
Yes. Good thing I bring up that, And while I was watching this this movie again, I was reminded of Ad Astra. There's the whole idea of loneliness in space. Despite the allure of look at how amazing space is, like, that kind of sucks, bro.
Yeah, now we'll talk about like, well, there's the political end of this is like, well, this stuff probably deliberately pushed to line up with like say SpaceX is doing, and who owns SpaceX, and that whole unfortunate culture that gets into it, where you have the art, and the art is fine on its own, and the creators are fine and seem to have their head on, but the fans and the people who pushing this don't seem to have their head on, right? That's where things just kind of get weird, and that kind of aspect of it. Again, 10 years out is like, this person turned out to be trash.
I understand.
And this other person turned out to be trash, and this thing that people hype up has been severely debunked, and so on and so forth, right? And
I think
or the promises that was made not even close to what they say they would do, and it's only because of this. And I think this movie started that for a lot of people. It was this movie. Because of this, what the message and the story of the movie was like, just the plot and what was being illustrated. I don't know.
Well, I'm just loving these factoids here, because I have a feeling this at the end of this, I'm going to learn a lot more about the show than that I thought I knew, right? But yeah, just to wrap things up, though, just the IMAX experience of it, though, was absolutely worth it for me. I really enjoyed the film, but yes, I did have problems with the third act, and I still do, right? But the funny thing is, right, and I'm saying this as somebody who actually owns the Blu-ray for this, right? And, proudly so. I actually own Inception as well, too, right? It was not one of my favorite, like when we all met up to share our top 30 films in the past decade, this movie was not on my list, nor was it in my honorable mentions. But that wasn't. That's not to say that this was not one of my favorite films of 2014, despite its flaws, right? But for me, my takeaway from this, though, and still to this day, right, is this was Nolan trying to reach that Kubrickian level. You could see the influences of 2001: A Space Odyssey all through this, right? And if you're familiar with Stanley Kubrick's work, that was the film that literally shot him to the stratosphere, right? And importantly, that was the film where it was like, here's what. Previously, I did Spartacus, right? And, Spartacus had, Fox's Spartacus, right? But this is one where it's like, it's ultimately my vision. Like, this is me becoming an author now. I'm going to do something very unconventional, very different, very off the cuff, right? And it's going to be something that you've never seen before. So whether you like it or not, upon first viewing, you're not going to forget. And the more you watch it, believe you me, you will love this film, right? And that was me in 2001, right? That was a lot of people when they first saw 2001, right? So yeah, this was, for me, I saw Interstellar as this was the stage where he was transitioning into the author, right? So back then, prior to that, when he, with the Dark Knight stuff and Inception, this was, all right, I'm going to do big budget extravaganzas, but they're going to have a lot of thought, they're going to have a lot of meaning to it, right? It's not just popcorn entertainment, but there's more depth than you might think, right? But this one is like, all right, I really want to tell something profound. I really want to share these existential ideas, but I also want to add a lot of emotion to it, though. And I'll just say this right out the gate, even recapping this, him and his brother Jonathan, boy, they were wearing their hearts on their sleeves when they wrote this, boy.
Yes!
Yep. It's about love, man, and love is so transcendent.
It's about love will save us. Love will save us.
Love will save us. Yeah. But when you pair that with the hard science, it's like, all right, I understand what you're trying to say, guys.
A plot rewrite, a quick handful of rewrites could have fixed this problem. Now, again, when we get to the point, when we get there, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll dive more into that later on, right? But yes, CC, your history with Interstellar, and especially as someone who was not a fan of Nolan up until Oppenheimer dropped.
Up until Oppenheimer? No. I mean, okay. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was a big Nolan fan, and I said, "Dude, I've just watched Interstellar, and I think I am a Nolan fan after all. I think I just hate the Dark Knight films, actually." Because at this point, when I look at the sheer, because there was this period of time where I had only seen a few Nolan films. I had seen Memento, and I really liked that. I think that might have been my no. I was watching his films chronologically at first, and so I started with Following, which is a really strong directorial debut. Really liked that film, and then watched Memento. I really liked that as well. As this slightly gimmicky noir, but also wildly intelligently written, and narratology is literally a area of academic interest for me, so of course I'm going to love Memento. And then, like Ricardo, I'm actually also a big fan of The Prestige. I kind of have a special soft spot for The Prestige because I love that reveal, especially near the end, is so bonkers that I've actually seen people on the internet trying to argue that that's not the real ending. That there's there's a twist.
That movie have one insane rabbit hole for it, like in terms of what happened, and what actually happened, and the ending, and what really going on or not going on. So I thought a certain thing was happening, and I'm like, no. But when you read the book and the movie, they're like, no, it's just even more grounded than that. That is not what happened. I'm like, holy shit, this movie. And listen, we'll literally spend hours just talking about that shit. So we gotta move on.
Oh, exactly. And so, but then and then I've also watched the Dark Knight films, and I think I've gone on record saying this. I am just not a fan of the Dark Knight trilogy. Like, I agree that the best one is the second one, The Dark Knight, but even that film is just, I don't know, it's a film that I respect more than I like, if that makes sense. Like, I think that Nolan wanted to make a pretty Heat-inspired, cops versus robbers type movie, but he has to kind of smuggle it into this Batman film. And I don't know, I just find that, once you start watching other movies and you've seen the kind of films that this film is kind of trying to be, I just kind of want to go watch those instead. So I'm not the biggest, but it took me a while, partially because, and this actually segues brilliantly with what you were talking about, Ricardo, with Nolan's fans. Nolan's fans are fanatical. That is literally the only word to describe it. And the Snyder comparison is very apt, because Nolan's fans, and Tarantino's fans are the same way too, they all have a religious fervor. Like, their favorite filmmaker is the greatest man to ever make movies ever, and he can do no wrong, and how dare you imply that he ever could. And I think his fans, more than anything else, kind of cooled me on the man. Like, I had seen 3 of his films, and I liked them, but I held back on exploring further because of his fan base, and because they were all over the place telling me that I was wrong for kind of being more, not even negative on The Dark Knight, just this just whatever. Right. And so, I don't know. I feel like there was that time in the 2010s where everywhere you went on the internet, every person who was talking about film had to put The Dark Knight on their favorite films of all times list, and everyone talking about how this was a masterpiece and how it was one of the greatest movies ever made and everything like that. And that, for me, got exhausting, and I was definitely and I got all that to say that I took a break from Nolan and kind of didn't think about him very much until Oppenheimer came out. And then I watched Oppenheimer and was like, oh. And I've said this, I've gone on record, I think one of my favorite things as a critic is to be wrong. I like being wrong, and I liked being wrong about Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer, and going and seeing this movie and going, oh, this is a masterpiece, actually. And it got me excited about the man. And I had been meaning to see Interstellar because, I love me science fiction, I love space movies, I love astronauts, I like all that kind of stuff. I'm kind of the perfect person for Interstellar, and we'll get into that when we talk about the movie in more detail. But I had been meaning to watch it, but I feel like there's this thing that happens with certain acclaimed or movies that are considered masterpieces, where you make a mental note to watch them and then just kind of don't get round to them, if that makes sense. Like, you kind of in your head, you're like, oh, I'll watch that at some point. I'll get around to that. And the problem is it's hard to, especially for me with someone like Nolan that I'm more on the fence about. But finally watching it and finally going, oh, this film is, and finally watching it. And after I actually watched it, so when Matthew was talking about doing it for this anniversary, I decided this was going to be my excuse to finally watch Interstellar. Given the timing of everything, I actually watched it the night before last, I think. Oh, okay. Yeah, I watched it. No. So the timeline was bananas. No, I watched it last night for the first time ever. Wow. I had never seen Interstellar before. My wife and I had been kind of watching our way through some different scary movies for Halloween, but we had borrowed our library's copy of Interstellar with the idea we were going to watch it on the 1st of November, so I could then hop in on the 2nd and record with you guys. And just to give context about how much we absolutely fell in love with this movie, we watched it Saturday night. We watched it Friday night. We were talking about it as we got ready for bed. We got up in the morning before, so we could go for a walk, which we like to do before I go to work in the mornings. And we just kind of picked up talking about it. Like, we just kind of picked up where we had left off the night before. We're talking about it, and then I went to work still thinking about it, and now I am on this podcast talking about it. And I think this might be up there, not quite as good as Oppenheimer, but definitely up there with Memento and The Prestige as one of my favorite, and definitely for me, like, damn, I think I like Christopher Nolan. Like, this is my goddamn, this guy might actually not be overhyped, actually.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Movie.
But
he's one of those people who I do think is very slightly overhyped.
Okay. And I agree with you, but I'll explain why. I think he's overhyped because his fans literally say he's the greatest filmmaker of all time.
Exactly.
When they're saying, that is overhyped. They're like, we all know that the greatest filmmaker of all time is Guillermo del Toro. But when
it was Kubrick. to me. But sorry, go on.
I mean,
I'm sorry. Go on.
Nicholas Ray is also right there. But I feel like when you are going around saying things, and not only do oh my god, some of the, I feel like we've all seen some of those video essays for Christopher Nolan fans talking about some of the movies that are just a little embarrassing, just a little okay guys, I understand he's very exciting. You can calm down a little bit. You don't quite need to. So yeah, he is overhyped, but only because his fans have a quite literally religious fervor about the man. That is the big reason.
Which we'll get into later.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If I could just say one thing before we jump into the review, right?
Go ahead.
I guess for me as a fan, right, not a super fan, mind you, but a fan, right, especially as somebody who absolutely loves the works of Kubrick, right? For me, I always saw. To me, this was where I saw. This film was where I saw Nolan being our generation's Kubrick, right? In the sense that every film that he drops is going to be different. It's going to be a different genre, but he's going to bring something new in quotes to the table. He's going to bring something that you've never seen before. Because right after this, he gave us Dunkirk and Tenet, and then Oppenheimer, right? So it's like that.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about Nolan. I was looking at as we were watching this movie, making sense of it, I was finding myself looking at his filmography and realizing, oh yeah, this is the movie that he made right after the Dark Knight trilogy. So he comes out as this kind of scrappy, kind of smaller scale filmmaker, has a couple smaller hits, and then absolutely explodes out the gate with the Dark Knight trilogy, and he's made Hollywood money, and he's made ridiculous Hollywood money. And I feel like whenever you're a filmmaker who has had several successful Hollywood hits in a row, the big question is, now what? And I agree. I think with Interstellar, Nolan essentially is saying, all right, the now what is whatever the hell I want to do.
So you're getting
I have made Hollywood money. And so the answer to the question of what now is whatever the hell I want to do, which is kind of the same brilliant logic that would lead us later to Oppenheimer. And I need to see Dunkirk, Tenet, and Insomnia are the only 3 Christopher Nolan films I haven't seen. I'm curious about all 3 of them. I've heard that Tenet is a mess.
Yeah, Tenet's a mess.
I've heard that Tenet is kind of like time travel James Bond or whatever, and I am
kind of.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be, but no, Interstellar sits in this place of it is a ridiculously ambitious movie. I find it really interesting that this is a film that's especially for a man who just completed an action trilogy. When you watch Interstellar, this is a movie with a lot of spectacle, a lot of dialogue, but not a lot of action. If you're someone who got into Nolan because
this movie only have one action sequence, kind of.
Yes,
really just one. And it's a great scene. But
which again, for a Hollywood movie, especially from someone who has, especially again, for a filmmaker who just made a trilogy of big budget action films, to come up with a movie that is this much talking and philosophizing and weird sciencey concepts is kind of miraculous. Like, I mean, part of this is also, I feel like, all of us collectively taking a moment to look back on Todd Phillips and going, okay, what went wrong here? Because again, same deal. Director made a absolute big Hollywood movie and then went, all right, now what? And in his case, it was to shit the bed. But but yeah, no, I love the ambition and the spectacle. There's so much about Interstellar that, like, obviously we get into that as we're talking about the movie more. But yes, there's a lot about Interstellar that fascinates me from the perspective, and especially with it so fresh in my mind. There's so much about it that fascinates me from the perspective of this man just made a trilogy of big budget mainstream Hollywood movies, and this is the project that is next. Like this is the next project. Like, I love it, and I can't wait to talk about more of that, honestly.
Yeah, so let's dive in one time, right? So just running through my notes. It's a 3-hour movie roughly, so I didn't write 3 hours of notes, but I took down as much detail as I can, right? So just gonna move gonna take my time, but just sort of cover as much as I can, during this review here, right? So we are introduced to Joseph Cooper, right, who is played by Matthew McConaughey. All right, right. Fun fact, actually won an Oscar in the same year for Dallas Buyers Club. I thought that was a big deal, and that kicked off the reconnaissance. Yes, that was the joke.
Yeah, this was the height of the reconnaissance.
Yeah, so he was riding over that, right? And 2014 was a year.
This was this year, and then when was True Detective?
Detective was I think like a couple of years after. I could be wrong. A few years later. No, 2015. No, not 2015. It would have been 2014. Hold up. Yeah. Shit. Was it the same year?
I think it was the same year. Yeah.
What?
Hold on. True Detective was 2014. Yep. Oh my god.
Yep. Same year.
All right. 2014 was McConaughey's year.
No, I remember watching it. It was in our place. I was in 24. Yeah. Right.
Wow. So, wow. Yeah. I mean. Salute, right? But anyway, so he plays this former NASA pilot and he turned farmer, right? And it's set up in this dystopian future, so it's pretty much established why it's the world is what it is, right?
So we didn't right. So this one I kind of liked about this, but then again, this is also kind of framing the whole political end of things, which is it doesn't say climate change, right?
No. But that term isn't mentioned
at all, right? But it's the implications. This is the implications of climate change. Like, one of the things people worried about could happen in climate change is in this, which is the main thing. That basically, what is this? No spoilers. Yeah, well, we'll start with that. Something called the blight, which is this thing that came about sometime, and it just started eating everything. And the reason why it flourishes is because it flourishes off of nitrogen somehow. So it's still, since it has so much more nitrogen and oxygen, it will super flourish, that just killing and eating everything.
Yeah.
And that is interesting. Like, they build from that. So there's all this food. So everybody had to be farmers.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Can't go to space again.
One kind of this idea that the film introduces, that in a future where this blight has destroyed, because the blight is interesting because it doesn't just destroy crops, it destroys soil, which is why so much of the soil gets reduced into this.
Yeah, because it got eaten. It eaten the nitrogen.
Yes, it's very directly inspired by the Dust Bowl.
Right, it's straight out the Dust Bowl, right?
Yes.
And so I can't remember if they used actual people from the Dust Bowl in those interviews.
I think they might have. Yeah, no, they might have. I think, yeah.
It was like people who still alive now. Well, at the time of the film, I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think so. So it was like a real thing. It's kind of like with District 9, where there's real people they're using sometimes.
Yeah.
Just so disturbing, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. But as I bring up that, right, I love that pseudo documentary stuff that you see in the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
And I love how it comes back in the end, right?
And that's contextualized. That's contextualized very well. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a nice little framing device to start.
Yeah, it's very Ken Burns in the style with the setup and the 4-3 ratio and all kind of stuff. But it works. It works. But it works really in terms of exposition. It's not like a long text scroll or some ominous narration talking about how the world went to shit. It's just these, these talking heads. I love that.
It's not Judge Dredd. It's not Judge Dredd.
No.
That fella that's yelling text at us, right?
It's really interesting because when I try to think about movies that use that particular, like fictional movies that will use these like weird, like kind of almost pseudo, like interview segments, the only two that I can think of are Luciano Visconti's Ludwig movie. Is like 4-hour movie about the last king of Bavaria.
Okay, and I need to get into that guy's work, by the way, so thanks for reminding me. Appreciate that. DM me at some point, and then I can give you some good starting points with Visconti. He's a genius, one of my all-time favorites. Another contender for greatest director of all time. Nice.
But then the other film I've seen that uses the same technique is one of my, and I dropped this one of my favorites a couple of years back, Warren Beatty's Reds.
Right. Right.
His film about the American Communist Party and that whole situation. Like, it is the same technique. And in that film, the people they interview were people that were actually alive and were actually there for a lot of the events that happened in the movie, because that film was made in the 80s and the events are talking about like the 20s and 30s. So there were people alive who remembered a lot of the stuff that they're talking about. So it's such an interesting cinematic context for Nolan to put his film, because it's just like, it's just absolutely bizarre, and I love it.
One thing I want to mention about the Black though is that they mentioned early on that it got rid of wheat 7 years ago. Okra was gone like about less than a year ago. So really the primary crop is corn. I thought that was really interesting, right? Very realistic in terms of that setting,
Okay, so behind the scenes, if I remember correctly, Nolan actually planted that corn for real.
But why though?
Like, sell it and make a profit.
Dude, like, he had Paramount and Warner Brothers. They could get people to plan that shit. Like,
anyway, they plant the corn and they sell it for real for others and for a profit for others.
Of course you sell that, right? Duh. But that's cool. That's a cool little tidbit. I didn't know that.
It's not just for chasing down a drone in with your pickup truck.
Yeah. But just go on. Sorry.
Well, I think the thing that makes it so interesting is that because this is a future where the crops are all failing one by one, there's a blight that's killing them, the soil is being destroyed. The thing that's so interesting is that it has created this dystopian future where the people that run the planet, at least, have decided that the thing that we most need to focus on is agriculture. Like, we don't have time for anything else.
Anything else, right?
We just have to focus all of our energy and our resources and all this other stuff on farming and trying to make better crops for the future, so that we get and kind of like actively avoiding, like, and this is part of the film that I think is really interesting, like philosophically, like kind of we don't have time to look for better solutions because we have to focus on the practical solution that we need to do now.
This is where the religion stuff comes in, because really a big argument is that, well, is this looking at the past and the past that doesn't work, quote unquote, and then the future, the so-called future, but like via Dr. Brand, you learn the big plot reveal about Dr. Brand, the older one is what do you call him? Michael Caine. Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
And they reveal about him, but then the conceit of what he was planning to do, and then the middle ground. That middle ground. And that middle ground will only make sense in the light of like religious thinking. But not backward religious thinking, smart religious thinking. So you need to not be, don't be a heartless future atheist, but also to be a dumb Neanderthal, or whatever it is, somebody from the Middle Ages. No, we are middle-aged serf. It have a way to cut through the middle. This metamodernism thing.
Right.
And
Well, it's really interesting because I think it's kind of it's how do I put this? It's a film that's trying to argue, and I feel like the reveal about Dr. Brand in particular does make this argument very strongly. But it's a film that's essentially trying to argue that neither pure science, pure science and pure logic will not save us. We have to find essentially it's kind of and I feel like this is why there are certain because by the way, even though this is Christopher Nolan's highest rated film on Letterboxd, fun fact that we live in interesting times. When you scroll through the Letterboxd reviews and you look for the people that do not like this movie, I think a lot of them are kind of annoyed that a man they assumed was a lot more logical and maybe a little bit of I'm trying to think like that the whole school of philosophy, Marcus Aurelius, men are really popular with like young men in particular. That kind of like we have to be logical and dispassionate and
Stoic.
Stoic. Thank you. I think a lot of young men had pegged Christopher Nolan as a stoic, and this movie.
That's the thing, So I in terms of the stoic thing, like I will admit I am kind of part of that still, right? To a certain extent. I was definitely like that 10 years ago. But there's that whole, you could be stoic, but you have to, being compassionate is a type of logic in itself. And if you know who, what's this guy's name, boy? He's kind of a big stoic philosopher. Italian philosopher. It's slipping my mind right now. But
I think I know the guy you're talking about. I'm blinking as well.
Yeah, life still. He's active dude. But he just talk about a lot of like how people misinterpret stoicism, and there's a whole thing. But it's that, right? It's this, you have to think about it like this. But I think a lot of it just leans into like a lot of just admittedly, just like a lot of Catholic stuff. It's like this is way to be a Catholic. You had to think, and you had to be and it really feel like that. And a lot of Catholics like this dude's movies. Like it's lined up well plenty. With Tenet, you see it with Tenet too. Like a big you could find a bunch of essays about
Ricardo, you know why I think so because of the organ music that Hans Zimmer used in this movie. I think that's why.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. The aesthetics part of it, that's all part of it. Like it's not a surprise. Like all of that is part of it. Like you don't have to be these backwards knuckle draggers in the United States who believe in that sort of junk. But you're still, it's not. But atheism is also false. Like it's also that, and back and forth, right? And it's that all of that thing, and that's what I think the movie is trying to go for, right? It's trying to do that,
It's trying. Well, it's
right.
I mean, as I said earlier, it's Christopher Nolan explicitly like coming out as not being any flavor of a stoic. Like I do not like. After watching Interstellar, I'm like, any idea I ever had that Christopher Nolan was a stoic is just gone. Like that does not work at this point. And
all right, no, sorry. Did you philosopher? I now remember Massimo Piglucci.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that guy.
Right. Yeah, reasonably popular. He's a decent dude, right? He actually never avoid all the bullshit with all of this. Like again, we're gonna get kind of political with this. We're gonna have something called the IDW and it's all of that bullshit, right?
Yes.
But this movie, I think, is like a kind of like a cornerstone for a lot of this stuff. Like a lot of people use this movie as that. They think like that. That's how this movie this think into the and the highlight of the movie nailed that was that. Like it has a line, and it's a really good line. But that's how they think. That's how they think about the world and these kind of things. They make it work for what it is. And it's like, well, I can't tell them no because that's where the material. That's what I seen it too. But I'll admit it's because I kind of grew up like a Catholic in Trinidad, I grew up with discernment and teaching all that Catholic school shit, right? Like it's that. So it's like, well, I get what it.
So you're picking up all those elements.
I see the vibe. I saw the vibe, and like where call him by again, where somebody like Elon Musk now comes in, and why he as popular as he is, that's probably popular with. I think Elon Musk is almost entirely a complete fraud, right? But
he is.
But he does tap into that energy very well. And once for some people, once you say the words, that's enough. And I don't think it is again the smarter end of these things now, like where the intellectual conservative comes in. and how it comes in with this film. And yeah, where the film goes in is with that, right? And as I said, you could have done this again, much like with Zack Snyder. It is quite possible that you could have gotten a good version of Man of Steel, right? It's not a surprise that Nolan was so heavily involved in Man of Steel, because there had a little movement going on at the time to try to do something, right? It culminates in my humble opinion, quite disastrous ways, but which we may or may not see sorted out this Tuesday. But
Lord,
right? But you get the point, right?
Oh God!
But you get the point. Like, a lot of this was just so like, okay. Yeah, so you have a whole scene in the movie now. We'll get to this now. A whole scene in the movie where a person who just outright denied the moon landing, right?
Okay,
right.
Oh God, that scene made me so upset. Like
I forgot about that.
I was so upset. I was so upset. Like not in a meta out of the movie kind of way, but like that was the problem with being someone who knows about the theories behind narrative is I know exactly the ways that movies manipulate their audiences and like how writing is designed to make you care about characters or not care. Right. Like all that stuff. So, like, I know for a fact that, like, I'm watching this scene and, like, this scene is meant to communicate that, like what kind of person the dad is, and is meant to make you, like, is meant to make you root for him and make you understand who he is, but also, we the audience are meant to be outraged at this idea that, in this future they've decided that it is so important to have everyone be farmers so that we can save the planet by farming even harder, I guess. That we just have decided that the moon landing was fake, and so like we don't.
Yeah, but but I sort of think about it. It just kind of got to that point where they had no problem hiring this effectively a person who's a teacher talking about the moon landing, and she had actually do the conspiracy theory stuff. And because in today's world we're so inundated with people who believe in conspiracy, all kind of idiots, flat earther bullshitters, whatever it is. I mean, down the line, moon landing is a big one. Right? Moon landing is always a big one. And you have a whole list of idiots who will tell you why it's fake or why this thing. Maybe that dude, you can find a video with this dude who getting punched by the late Buzz Aldrin. And, it's all of that, right? Yeah, it's all of that. Like, it's just... Right.
If I could just interject for a sec, right? So the scene that we get in that, right? Because I paused the review, right? The breakdown of whatever it is, right? This scene is where after we're introduced to Joseph's daughter Murphy or Murph, right?
Murph.
Who is very smart for the age, right? That she's like 10 years old.
Also, I forget Spider-Man is in this movie. Baby Spider-Man, you can find him. I think he's in this movie.
Okay. Well,
I saw Baby Chalamet.
Yeah, I saw Timothy Chalamet.
Sorry, not Spider-Man. Baby Muad'Dib. Sorry, not Spider-Man.
Yes. I saw his face. I'm like, what? You in this?
I did a spit take. I did an actual spit because I was like, because I was like, what the fuck, Timothy? What are you doing here?
Yeah, like you see, his career started off strong. I don't know if that was his debut. I doubt it is, but okay. Well, I mean, hell of a way to kick off your career, right? But yeah, the scene we're talking about is where Joseph goes to this high school, right, where Murph attends, right?
Yes.
And yeah, this parent teacher meeting basically, right? And yeah, the teacher talk about she had this book and she was showing it with her friends and they were laughing at her because the whole moon landing thing, and she got in a fight, right? Because she believes in it, and of course the father believes in it and whatnot. But it's like, no, we don't believe in that, and we're not supposed to peddle this kind of info around in the school now. I just look at it as worldbuilding. I didn't think that there was something deeper to that moment, but you guys are saying that there actually is. It's like, actually learning stuff, right? So yes, now you can resume with the whole inclusion of that whole theory. Sorry, that whole conspiracy theory. Sorry.
Right. I feel like for me that sequence is really interesting because it kind of gets into some of the film's philosophy. Like, because this is a film that essentially, again, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Interception, but essentially this is a film where it's like, no, love is what will save us. The movie, and this is also why I'm actually surprised to hear that they were real scientists in consultation on this movie, because this was around the point when I said to myself, oh, this is not hard science fiction. Got it. Now I know what to expect. Because for me, we have to get a certain character that I felt could have fixed a lot of this problem, and it would have people at least be able to like absorb the conceit a little better.
right?
I think I know who that character is, but we will get to him in a bit.
Because the whole when you say love is a thing, and again, I had to get into my bag with analytical philosophy or whatever it is. But you're saying love is something versus gravity, right? Right. Love is real, you know, right? Yeah. But when you're saying love is real, it's real in at least if you want to talk about it in terms of science, love is real in terms of what you are in your body, what's going on in your body, what's going on in your brain. It's your body. Your body is real. Your body is capable of love. It's not magic. But even things that, and listen, we could get into a whole fucking bag with this, but even things that are imaginary are still technically a type of real, because it's your brain doing shit.
Well, it's like the whole. Well, okay, this is why philosophically the whole "what if we live in a simulation" thing is bullshit. Because it's like, okay, if we live in a simulation, it actually doesn't matter, because we still kind of have to go. Like, it's functionally, it's still real.
Right.
So there's not really any particular, like, okay, we live in a simulation, so what? It doesn't actually change our lives.
Right, exactly. Right? You're correct about that. Simulation theory is a total non-starter. Like, it's not an argument that should be taken seriously in that any way. But my point is that, and again, I'm going to get into this. I think with a couple of tweaks to the script, you could have make the more hardened skeptic types. People who are willing to laugh at this bullshit. And when I was in a screening, that's somebody who just bust out laughing when the younger Dr. Brand said the love thing. And like, holy shit, Nolan, you kind of fucked up.
Man. Which you'll get into later, but yeah, go on.
Right. Yeah, but all right. So we had to get into that. So let us get into the script. Like, they chase, so they drive to the core and they find the drone. Well, it had to get to the part where the bookshelf.
Right. Yes, so I was going to mention the NORAD scene, right? But, prior to that, now, there's a bit where there's this huge sandstorm and, Murph and his family goes back home, right? And then now, they go to Murph's, very impressive library. Like, just the amount of books she have, like, wow, you know what I mean?
Oh,
her age, I was like, I was watching, like, God damn.
Really well read.
Yeah.
That's the
right. So there's a moment like in her room where she looks down and she sees like Sana, but the way how it's almost section off into like these lines now. Both Murph and Joseph look at it like, oh, this could be coordinates, right? And because they're uber smart now, they figured out it's like they found the coordinates now, so they realize that it's actually this abandoned NORAD facility.
Right. So this part's the first problem I had with the plot.
Okay, tell us.
Yes. Nitpick. So this is a dumb nitpick. Why would you think it's coordinates? Right?
Because you're a nerd.
Well, but here's the thing. Sorry, Ricardo. Here, man. I think it's because of Hans Zimmer's score. Because remember, there's a moment where it becomes like an epiphany, right?
No.
And because of the music, it's like, oh my god.
Why would? Yeah, no, that's fine. Why would they think it's actually coordinates?
Okay.
Now,
I understand. Yeah.
Again, a quick nitpick to the script is this, right? Quick tweak. Again, nerd shit. I'm some bullshit on the internet. You don't have to listen to me. But my point is, what I could have done, what I would have done is just have Hooper say, "Hey, that kind of look like coordinates." That's what you to see. Don't take it seriously. Don't take it seriously because he's an adult. You don't have to take why would I think some random? With his scratches that he says are ghosts or something like the daughter saying, he would take her seriously, right? You'd ignore her, not taking her seriously. She takes that statement seriously. It's like, oh, it's coordinates because she's still a kid, and she'll take that, and she still believe in the ghost thing, right?
Yes.
And then, I remember she was learning to drive, so if it was up to me, I'd have her, fight down the father to, get her there, or she'd have probably even steal the truck, and then the father would have catch up with her, and then, when they reach, halfway or something like that, she would have, real plead with him that no, it's a real thing, and the coordinates, you're correct about the coordinates, and then he would humor her. Right. And then he would go and then find the answer.
That's what I mean.
My problem is that Coop just said it was coordinates too. Like, what? Does Coop accept this? Well, I couldn't follow.
This is what I was saying.
Listen, I probably have to rewatch a movie to say this. I don't understand why Coop accept that information about it being coordinates. Why would you think that?
This is what I was saying from the beginning about how once we had that whole argument with the teacher about the moon landing, I was like, this isn't just not hard sci-fi. This movie is actively romantic. And I don't mean romantic in, love. I mean romantic in the original classical sense of philosophically and artistically striving for some kind of higher ideal of humanity, like the best, like all these different things, like the romantic movement, romantic philosophy, that kind of thing. So, like, hello, Matthew's audience. We're going to talk about philosophy here on this episode about Interstellar. But specifically, like, because I think one of the things about this movie that really struck a chord with me is there is a romantic side to space travel. There's a romantic side to, and like the moon landing in particular is kind of the symbol of that. One of the things that I feel like for romantics like myself in this modern age is that there's something decidedly unromantic about the modern form of space travel, where it's all being essentially licensed out to people like, you know, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who are taking on, like, and Boeing, like, doing private contracts to go explore space, because that feels corporate. Whereas, like, you go back to, and this is why I feel like this is why I just bought Secret Underground NASA, because, like, the whole concept of
I didn't have a problem with Secret Underground NASA. Well, that's not what I had a problem with. Didn't have a problem with that at all.
For you, it's like it's like he's an adult. Why would he look at these lines and say, "Huh, these are coordinates"? Like,
he does. But what he said is that it looked like coordinates. Like, if he said that, he said, "No, it's looking kind of like coordinates." Whatever. And then he forgets it, but she takes it seriously. I could buy that, and then she begs him now. But I feel like it's coordinates. Really?
I feel like
I have to rewatch the movie just to get the context of that, if he did that proper.
For me, once they had that whole argument about the moon landing, because remember, the moon landing argument is also followed up by that whole bit where he's on the porch with the grandfather and they're talking about this stuff further, and he has that great line where he's like, we used to look up at the stars and try to find our place up there. Now we look down in the dirt and try to find our place there. Like,
good line,
And it really does this great job of establishing the film in this tradition of more romantic science fiction, this idea of kind of exploration itself as a romantic notion. Like, you know, we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is there, this whole idea. And like and so because of that, I kind of like, I feel like for me, this is why I have fewer nitpicks with any of the film on a more technical level, or even some of the more logic-y type stuff, because like when it comes to a lot of that more romantic stuff, like I'm used to a certain amount of it because it's more meant to be ideological. Like, what's a good example of this? Weirdly enough, Joe Dante's film Explorers feels very similar to this until that third act reveal of what the mysterious thing in space was.
Oh, you know, I haven't seen that show in years.
You know, the movie I parallel this to is another really good space movie that I absolutely love. Contact.
Which also featured Matthew McConaughey, right? Yeah.
Also starring Matthew McConaughey. And the same. Anyway, Matthew McConaughey plays a very similar character, which is the whole. Remember, the whole thing was the whole faith versus science, and he was the smart, churchy guy, and he also like Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all of that. It's the same ideas. And I listen. Even we call them take them call it Christopher Nolan's Contact. We call them honest reviews now.
Yes.
Honest trailers. It's that. And that's why I look at this movie now. It's like, wait, it's real trying to do something, and you can't tell the difference. But this character a little too far. And I'll listen. I'm going to get to this part because I thought it had a character who I thought was completely squandered that could have done a way to address this properly. There's a little few more lines, and you do that. Whatever. Right. Go ahead.
Okay, so in NORAD, right? And I should mention earlier, the reason why I mentioned music, right, is that I absolutely love the score from Hans Zimmer, right? It is so
masterpiece.
So majestic, boy, but very, very emotional.
For me, Mountains, for like a hot 2 months, Mountains was my morning routine song.
Wow. Yes.
Mountains is just so good, It's absolutely good. Yeah, go ahead.
Just fantastic score, right? But in NORAD, if I have to mention this, right? Taz, right? The robot that's there. Right. I forgot that Taz was there at the jumper, but I love the one thing.
Probably one of my favorite like AI characters. Like,
that design though blew me away when I first saw it. Right? I love that. It's like it looks like two like a block-like metal piece. Yeah. And you have like two metal bars attached it now. But it's the way how it moves that always caught me now, you know, like almost like the legs, like almost like the middle piece have to move forward while the legs moving back and forth.
Yeah.
I don't. Just to close over here. I don't know who came up with that concept, boy. But round of applause, boy. That is such a genius design and so original, in my opinion, right? But
it is.
Yeah, Ricardo.
It does. I think it have like real like ideas for robots in terms of like how stuff does fold, because the idea is that there's this consistent kind of almost fractal folding thing with cars. You notice it'll have a bar, and then a bar will fold out from the bar, and then another smaller bar will fold out just so it to do something. And then it's perfectly designed to be in the ship in its own slot to do that really well. And then it knows how to like rotate to move quickly or turn around, because everything is blocks and squares now. Yeah. And then like, it's a real clever design. And then they do the whole humor thing, which I like. It was a running.
I love that. A humor percentage. I think it was up to 90%.
Yeah, no, Taz is a bro. Taz is a total bro. Like one of my favorite AI characters in science fiction.
And also because it's Nolan, right? Of course, it's a reference to the TARDIS, right? Doctor Who, get it? Right. TARDIS, duh, right?
Oh my god!
Only when I recap this movie, I was like, oh shit, TARDIS, duh, right? That's it. Okay, right. But yeah, I forgot that Taz was there from the jump. I thought this when he went on the ship. That was when he was introduced now. But
you had another robot as well.
Yes, there's another one. But not Cars. It's called Case. I made the joke initially. The next robot was called Cars, but it's Case. That's the name of it, right?
Right.
But in Nora now, that this is where we introduced to Dr. Amelia Brand, who is played by Anne Hathaway. If you remember, she won the Best Actress award, Oscar a year earlier. Yes, it's for a performance that kind of overrated, but I see why she won it. Yeah, for Les Miserables, right? Because the camera was on and she was singing and crying, and it was just one take. That's why she won.
Right.
I still stand by that belief. She won for that song and how she was crying, right? But whatever. She wins the Oscar. Okay, cool. And she's Catwoman, right? So whatever. Yeah. So she's the doctor of Professor John Brand, right? Who was Cooper's mentor, right? Back in the days, right?
Right.
Yeah. Who is played by Alfred Pennyworth himself. Michael Caine, right? Yeah. And yeah, he's Michael there Caine. Too. And yeah, Michael Caine, right? Ba-doomps, right? But again, seeing this film after all these years, I forget these little plot points, right? I like that you basically see the last remnants of NASA, Dread. So it's like the people who just kind of like, not so much survive, but just kind of like stuck it out there. Like they're in this not underground, but they're in this, they're this like, place, away from people, and they pretty much organizing to kind of, to get themselves out of Earth, right?
Yeah, it's kind of little like, this is more likely illegal, and then it's a little on the Ayn Rand end of things, right? It is.
Oh, okay, because they're doing things off the grid. I got you. Yeah.
Off the grid, and they have the society of all geniuses. And it's like,
kind of Rand's ideas that like a utopian society would be all the smart people coming together to make kind of this like perfect society, and like it's like kind of this. Like, Megalopolis is very similar in this way. Like, this idea that, like, we need the smart people. Like, the smart people should be in charge. Although, we'll get into this later. But I also think this movie kind of does a great job of explaining why that's a terrible idea.
Well, they play with it because it does subvert the conceit for its own. You're correct about that. I was like,
Like, at first I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. And then later when they did that reveal, I was like,
yeah, well, it did. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, that makes sense. So it was a repudiation of that in a sense, kind of. Yeah. But then the ending doesn't do that, and I gotta get to the end.
Yeah, we get to the end, right? So yeah, basically Cooper finds out the plan that Professor Brand was doing, right? It's an elaborate setup though, and it's one of those things that because Nolan going out of his way to make it as realistic in quotes, right, as possible, you just kind of buy along with it, right? It's sci-fi, space travel, it's like whatever, right? This is the future, right? So yeah, basically they build this Ranger, but it's supposed to meet with a mothership called the Endurance, and basically the plan is for humanity to leave Earth because the blight will eventually reduce the oxygen, right? And then pretty much everybody will die.
Well, specifically the reveal that the blight is so much worse, things are not going to get better. Things are not going to get better. The blight is only going to get worse.
Yeah, and eventually corn will be wiped out. Like the last eventually, crop will be wiped out, and then that's it, right? Yes. Curtains, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's convenient, but all right, this is a movie we're watching here, right? So, Cooper is the only man who's skilled enough to pilot the Endurance. I love how even early on is like he was like waiting for me to show up to do this, sir. It's almost like that. But, Professor Brand being who he is like, well, you're here, so look, do this now, save the world, please. Right. Almost like that there. So again, it's one of those things you had to kind of let slide because, it's the plot and, they had to move now,
Right. Well, right. So the plan is, right, so again to the details, right? So the plan was that Dr. Brand was working on this equation to solve a problem.
Yes.
Right. It was never clear to me what that problem was. I
don't think they just mention it, but they didn't really go into detail with it though. I don't know.
My guess is what they solved is effectively quantum gravity. Right. So if you know your physics, in physics, both we call it relativity and quantum mechanics can really square with each other, but both are really good models for addressing things. And if you could square them, it'll solve a bunch of problems in terms of engineering and gravity and how to move things about.
Well, especially, and specifically because they have, because the way they did it before was they launched these 12 scientists out into space.
Right.
They found these 12 to explore these 12 worlds that could potentially support life. And
right. And the idea was to map out these habitable worlds. Right.
Right, found these habitable worlds, and in each one was supposed to land on the world. This becomes important later. They were supposed to land on the world, explore, and then send back whether or not the world was suitable for life. I mean, whether they
couldn't tell from that distance. They couldn't tell from that distance because the white was that the worlds were big enough for just big enough just to go to, but we don't know if we can live there.
And the world.
Another thing too.
They had things like water and gravity.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing too was the whole, they had to, make a guess. But then the other thing too is that they don't know who make the wormhole. It's a wormhole that they find. And that's already big reason, right? They found a
wormhole that connected them to these 10 habitable planets.
Right, these planets. And then we don't know who make the wormhole. So it's presumably is some good people who do so.
Some higher intelligence. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, well, they just basically say beings. They don't say aliens.
They address this later.
I'll talk about that.
Not a big nitpick in the script I had, but whatever.
But then the thing that is important is that. But the important thing about this is that yes, they've got these planets, but how are we going to get people from Earth to these planets?
Right. So this is where the plot comes in. So Dr. Brand had the answer. He was solving the problem, or he claimed to solve the problem, and then that was the idea. And this is where the big. Well, we could get to this point, I suppose, because it is all the interstellar parts about when they dock in with the ship, and this comes relevant later. But take a little notice is that when they was docking with the ship, they use metric units. Just listen.
Oh.
Just using metric.
Oh.
And then later in the other scene where they had the emergency dock, they was using imperial units.
Okay.
And that to me is some real smart conservative bullshit. Like something that you swear Nassim Taleb write this thing or something like that. If you know who that is, right? Is that bullshit? Like it's like, oh my god, I don't you're sneaky, I know what you're doing, whatever. Basically the whole, but they had to get through the wormhole and then get to a black hole.
Yes.
Right. And that's where things get kind of wonky at that point. Because they don't know which part is which.
Well, specifically because it becomes this, and this whole question of how is the human race going to survive? So the way they explain it to him is the way they explain it to him is that there are two plans. Plan A is once they find a habitable world, they will get as many humans as they can onto essentially this giant space station that they're.
But that's the thing.
Their headquarters is also a space station.
No, but that's the thing. The equation would solve that problem.
Yes.
Because if they solve the equation, they could solve the engineering to the problem.
Exactly.
And then it wouldn't be a problem. They could literally get millions of people off the planet. But that was the twist.
And that's supposed to be Plan A. Plan B is they have. They say hundreds or thousands of fertilized eggs?
I think it's hundreds.
Like literally
frozen embryos. Yeah.
Right.
Essentially to. So I feel like so Plan A is the human species and human culture, and then Plan B is essentially just the human species will survive. Essentially.
Yeah.
And then so this way, all right. So they get to they do the docking thing. They get to thing. They thief something from what was the name of that movie with Lawrence Fishburne in it?
Okay, so you get to the Event Horizon stuff in a bit,
Event
right?
Horizon, yeah.
We'll get to that in a bit. We'll get to that in a bit, right? So,
Yeah.
prior to the space stuff, right? We should mention that Cooper has
Murph.
Murph is like she against all this because she father
Right.
going and you're not sure how long it'll take last, right? So
Right.
this pretty much ends with her just being furious about it, right? So you get to that later.
Right.
So roughly 40 minutes into the movie, we finally get to see space stuff, right? Or at least this is the Ranger making it up to Endurance,
I
right?
look great.
And these moments are why this film won Best Visual Effects at the Oscars the following year. When that movie won that, I was like, yep, rightfully deserved though. Yep. You're right, Ricardo.
Definitely.
Seeing those moments in IMAX was great, and I love that. I don't know if you saw this version, CC, right? But on the Blu-ray, right? And you see this with Nolan's films when it comes to the IMAX shot scenes, the full screen, right? So they fill up the whole screen. When you see it there again, boy, it's like wow.
That's one thing I was noticeable on the movie, because it was shifted from IMAX to letterbox throughout the films. A lot of people was noticing that. It didn't bother me, but it was noticeable. Like they confirmed the whole thing in IMAX. Okay, that kind of.
Well, he wasn't as ambitious. He wasn't that ambitious as yet, but whatever. I don't know, right? Well, maybe it's a studio thing. But yeah, those sequences look gorgeous in my opinion, right? And just like 2001: A Space Odyssey, you could tell like they were pulling from real footage, right? Like, look, the moment where the Ranger leaves Earth, right? They have that shot of the back section. I forgot the name of it, right? Fall, removing itself. I swear that was archival footage, And I swear they do like some slight color design to make it look like it was archival. I was like, nah, they created this for this movie. I'm like, what? It's not though.
I feel like Nolan. No, I mean, we learned this with Oppenheimer, right? Nolan is. It's not just a question of good special effects. Nolan is ridiculously smart at how to I was blown away learning how they created a lot of the atomic stuff in Oppenheimer.
Right.
The way they got all those shots of particles moving and accelerating, the actual atomic bomb explosion itself, and all that other stuff. It's some out of the box problem solving to create some of these effects. The whole bit where they're leaving Earth, and I know the shots you're talking about, the bits where they disengage a lot of the booster rockets once they are out in space, and a lot of it does look like archival footage from old space launches and everything, and it absolutely blows my mind because I'm sitting there like you, how?
Yeah, how? I should really I should have looked at the behind the scenes stuff that was on the Blu-ray, right? And it just gets better from there. When they reach the Saturn, by my God, those shots look amazing. There's a shot where you are seeing just how large Saturn is because you're seeing the Endurance, right, as this white dot, right? And boy, Nolan and his team, just the thought process behind it, right? I love how the sun is glaring on the Endurance itself. So you just see this dot glowing just for a couple seconds. Nobody would have think about that, and he did. But yeah, those shots look amazing. Even though I saw it on my laptop screen, they just look fantastic, right?
It looked fantastic on my TV at home.
Yeah. And of course with Hans Zimmer music in the background, boy, is this is heavenly. This is just heavenly.
Well, let's acknowledge real quick. Hans Zimmer is a great composer, but he is also definitely a composer who occasionally phones it in a little bit. But he is not phoning it in.
Agreed.
He is not phoning it.
He did not phone it in for this at all. He put in work on this. He put in work. Ricardo, you're saying about the Saturn stuff.
All right, but the actual the wormhole itself.
That's what I was going to get to. Cause right after that is the wormhole. That to me is one of the most amazing moments in the film, right? But here, Ricardo, is where you could tell me if, because later on a guy says it's looking for a pearl instead of a what do you call it, boy?
Oyster.
Instead of an oyster. But you could come right the black hole, right? Yeah. But I have never seen a wormhole look like this. If you were to tell me how a wormhole will look like, I can't tell you. I can't describe it other than how it looks.
That's the thing. It won't look like a hole, right? It'll just look like it'll be like what a hole is, but in 3D space. But to us, it'll be like that. So that is the high dimensional stuff. So it's really a fifth dimensional thing, or maybe a fourth dimensional, whatever. Okay. I don't get it. I don't understand that shit anyway. So,
okay.
It's a fifth dimensional object as seen through the third dimension, because all we watch is our own eyes. But the higher beings, the block beings, or whatever you want to call them, make it.
Right.
And so you just have to go through this. Basically, it's a weird lensy sphere that just warping light around it. But the second you go through, you go on and you pop out wherever it is you somewhere else now. Well, it's presumably another galaxy. I'm not sure how far away they went from
another galaxy. They, if I remember correctly from last night, from watching it the other night, they specifically said that they explicitly said that all of these habitable planets they found were in other in another
galaxy. Right.
You're right.
The movie should have been called Intergalactic then. However.
Right. Well, there's a couple points I want to make before we get to CC's thoughts on the wormhole sequence, right? For me, this is Nolan's Stargate sequence, right? But just with all the psychedelic lights, right?
Sound design is so fucking good in this.
Yes. There's an actual shot, right, where you see two sides of the wormhole and you see like this split in the middle. I watch that, my jaw drop. And like the stars moving in opposite directions. Again, this is Stargate shit. This is Stargate shit right here, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a call it an abyss moment, right? James Cameron film, right? Yeah, where Amelia notices one of the beings reaching out to her, and then she touches it, right? But
we find out what I was about.
Yeah, we find out what it is, right? It's this very opaque looking kind of thing, but she doesn't not show what it is, right? But yeah, that whole sequence was just amazing. Sound design, music, of course the visual effects, right? So yeah, CC, your thoughts on the wormhole sequence, right?
So, and this actually goes back to what you were saying earlier about the robot. One of the things that makes Interstellar such a great movie is that Nolan, and he kind of does this all the time, Nolan has his influences and he has places he is drawing from, but when it comes to genre, he's not quite as interested in other directors as pulling. Okay, so as an example, in science fiction, we all kind of have an idea about what a laser is, right? Like, we all have this concept of a laser that everyone in science fiction agrees on. It's like, to the point where if I'm writing a science fiction short story, I don't have to explain how a laser works. It's one of the most interesting things about reading science fiction from the 50s or older. They always have to pause and explain, you see this gamma have hyper-energizes the particles. So, but as a result of this kind of shared language of science fiction, a lot of science fiction writers and filmmakers, artists in general, don't have to really reinvent a lot of stuff. They can just go off what everyone already knows. Right. But what Nolan does throughout Interstellar is he doesn't reinvent. He's not going out of his way and trying to be the most original ever. However, he is interested in not just doing it the way everyone else has done it, because, like, with the design for the robot, like talking to people in robotics, being like, all right, what are some actual robot concepts that are being played around and being discussed? Let's look at those.
So this is what I've always said to Nolan. Nolan is very good at the aesthetics of realism.
Yes.
And so,
not realism.
No, not realism, but the aesthetics.
Not realism.
What people think is real. So what he's do, and another person I like, probably one of my favorite authors, Neil Stephenson. He does this as well, where it's as if an engineer wrote this. And what you'll do, you'll already get the sense that this is a real thing, or you'll give the aesthetics of it being a real thing. So what Nolan does brilliantly is you'll have this really fantastical thing, right? When it's time to boil down to explain what it is, it's totally fantastical. So the dream machine from Inception, or the inversion machine from Tenet, or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
But what he does, he will lampshade the hell out of it, right? Really intelligently. That is one. And then two, he will drown it in workably grounded jargon.
Yes.
Right? It's not Star Trek Technobabble. You never do that. You'll never do that. You'll use words in workably proper context, and then get people who you will take seriously to talk about it seriously. Like there's a trick to all of the sci-fi fantasy stuff, right? Get great actors to make it get it seriously. That's how Gandalf could get it to take all that goofy bullshit seriously, right?
My favorite version of what you are talking about. Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, we all know, legendarily great friends. Peter Cushing plays Grand Moff Tarkin. Christopher Lee, long careers. After So Christopher Lee, of course, is one of the first people to see Star Wars because his friend Peter Cushing is in it as Grand Moff Tarkin. After the movie, they have a conversation over the phone where Peter Cushing is like, Peter Cushing, hey, how did you enjoy it, dear boy? It's like, I thought it was quite lovely. I just have one question. What is that? Peter, what is a Grand Moff?
Right.
And Peter Cushing is like, I couldn't tell you.
Right. And
because he just sells the conceit of it.
Sells the conceit really well, right? And what Nolan does, you just look, is a big trick. Sorry to say it. You get some white guy in a suit to talk some bullshit, and you'll probably believe it, right? What Nolan does is retro-encabulator. Look up something called the retro-encabulator. Look that up. That is what Nolan does with his sci-fi. It's that, like, really workably plausible jargon in his science fiction, and then but he'll write it as realistic as he can up to the point of the plot device or whatever it is, right? And it's some good stuff, and then he'll build from that in really intelligent worlds. One of my favorite science fiction author, Neil Stephenson, he does this really well as well. He will describe the hell out of something, and you make it really feel, boy, that thing, you could build that though. You could really build that, and it's good stuff. Again, I think this has all side effects about this kind of things in terms of the real world. But, it's that aspect of it that really works, And have a lot of people who kind of believe, have a lot of people who believe real bullshit because of that. Unfortunately. Yes. They think this thing is possible or plausible in that sense, or you'll overpromise something, right? And you'll come out before it could, or they'll talk about AI in a certain way, or this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a very... a performance of skepticism that is perfectly applied for a movie, but unfortunately it fools people in the real world, right? And it fools too many otherwise intelligent people, that kind of thing. But Nolan is great at that. He's a great filmmaker in that sense, right? The idea of real world technique, you get a sense of this thing. He gets Krypton to model a black hole. By the way, after this movie, we saw a black hole for real, and it looked like this.
Okay.
Like, well, yeah.
What?
Yeah, they actually nailed it. Like, yeah.
Oh,
Krypton's modeling, like, they actually model the black hole. It wasn't just some special effects artist shit. They use computers to model it, to make it look like that.
Oh, my God.
And then, well, I think Star Trek Discovery used this as well. And it's like, well, everybody had to use what a black hole looked like up close from now on. Like, for this.
Right.
And then we saw the actual scientists, for real, found a black hole in, I forget where it is, M32, somewhere in the next galaxy. I say, look, you actually see what a black hole should look like. And it's like that. The picture is like,
have you all seen Interstellar? It's like that.
It's like that. And they nail it. This is correct. This is like largely correct. Like I show it up some. If you nitpick the journalism behind it, you'll be like, no, this is bullshit, but this is correct, and so on. So science journalism is trash.
It is.
Right?
We are constantly somehow science journalism is so bad. We are constantly discovering evidence of life on Mars.
Right.
Like constantly.
But that's the thing, though. Like what Nolan does is brilliant in that sense. So you get to this point. Like get to the point with the thief from Event Horizon.
Right, so we just enjoying all the space stuff, right? I didn't mention the black hole. This is how amazing that looked, but this is where they're going into the planet where Dr. Miller, this astronaut, right, who they sent up.
Right, so they have to make a choice. They have to make a choice.
And
which one to go? They had to make a gamble now. And Romilly, so I think Romilly's an underutilized character, and we'll get to him.
Agreed. Yes. Because for me, I like that. Like in his place now, he's established as, look, I just kind of going along here because, like, I'm not no astronaut, I'm not no pilot, nothing like that, right? But I am a scientist. I know a lot about these things.
He's a theoretical physicist, right?
Yes.
He's the one who and he's again. They take the scene from from
Event Horizon, where basically you take the paper, you punch a hole through it, and how he explains it. Right. It's for the audience. I get it. Like for me, I was like, all right, well, thank you, because I forgot that moment was in Event Horizon, to be honest, right?
Right.
When I first saw this film, I was like, all right, thank you. I'm not sure if everybody else in the audience will be invested, but at the time I immediately picked up on this. Like, Nolan really could do something else as well. No, I feel he did that for the audience. Like, okay, what's the simplest way I could show it? And he talked to Kip. It's like, yeah, do the same shit from Event Horizon. It worked, right? Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll do it. Right, that's what we do, right? Yeah. So let's touch quickly on Miller's planet, right? That's what I'm gonna call it, right? Just the planets themselves, right? Well, at least the tree that we see, right? I love just how specific they all are. So this one is an ocean world, right, or a water world. world, right? Haha, right?
Right.
And even that looks breathtaking, though. Don't mind, it's just pure water that you're seeing here, right?
Right.
Man,
So
yeah.
what happens is that so this world, so what happens is that in the tidal, because of the tidal thing from the black hole itself, because it's close to the black hole, because it's glowing around the black hole.
That
But
explains
it's
the
so-
waves. That's why the waves. Oh, okay. You see,
Yeah, it's
I didn't know
tidal
that.
waves.
Wow.
Like when we take a tidal waves is from the moon, but that's just the small effects of small amount of gravity. Well, what is happening if you have something as massive as a black hole? You'll get these super waves.
That's true.
Right.
Right. And, that is,
Boy,
well, and then
boy,
you learn why the other scientists died.
Yeah.
Because they get caught up in this. This is the coolest part of the movie because it has
It's one of the best parts.
It is.
because
it
it has my favorite track called Mountains. That's where the clock ticking.
Oh,
And
that
then
song,
because-
right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, you learn that they couldn't fuck around because you find out because they're so close to the I think they call the black hole Garganta. I can't remember
Yeah,
the name.
Gargantua.
Yeah. Garganta, right. So when they get too close to it now, time just pass, and what you learn
Yeah,
is I
so
think
1 hour is 7
1 hour
years.
is 7 years back. on
7
Earth.
years, no?
Oh.
Yeah, that is insane.
That is
So
insane, yes.
I think every
It
clock
is.
tick,
It's
every clock tick is a D or something like that.
oh,
Oh, shit.
Roughly. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Again,
And
the
that's what the
thought
song is.
process
And it
that
just-
went into this movie, boy.
So
I'm
that's why this
No.
movie works, because it gets into like the existential horror of cosmic space and distance and time and space time
it's
and
like
gravity.
it's so terrifying. Like
That
Miller,
is terrifying.
they call it Miller's Planet. I think Miller's
Yeah.
Planet to me is the most terrifying
Yeah,
of
it's
the
simple.
planets, because every planet they visit has a very distinct look, and I really appreciate it. It goes back to what I'm saying about how none of the aesthetics, none of the visuals or anything are half-assed. Everything is like,
Right.
okay, well, what does it actually look like? And what I appreciate about Miller's Planet is the absolute existential, like taking the
Yeah.
theory of relativity, which we've seen people kind of mess around with in kind of, more existential ways, but then straight up in this situation being like, okay, but what, like creating that conceit of every hour on this planet is 7 years back on Earth.
Yeah,
And so any kind of fuck up on this planet is going to cost everything. Like everything. Like the reason they know that they only have a limited amount of time, because at this point they also have this idea that they know when the blight will wipe out humanity, and they know how many years it will take.
Yep.
So they know that they cannot get stuck on a planet that is where every hour is 7 years back on Earth. So, and they spend this whole time coming up with a way to land on the planet and view it as quickly as possible.
Right, and that was the idea. The idea was to dip in quick, grab the
quick,
and then dip back out. The problem is that they didn't know what killed Miller.
Yeah, what killed Miller, yes. And then you see literally this gigantic wave, and when I saw that, my jaw dropped. I was like,
God.
wow, that looked amazing, right?
The problem is you couldn't tell from the distance, and they say those aren't mountains.
Yes, I love that. I was thinking, wait, mountains?
How big it is there.
Yeah,
Like,
mountains.
okay,
we talk about mountains, and then when you see where it is, like, oh wow, shit.
Yeah,
right?
and
Yeah.
when you learn like what how other planets are, like you learn how Jupiter is, and like, oh yeah, it have a storm that's going on for 500 years now, or some insane shit like that, or this planet have diamonds raining as ice or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, it's some wild shit.
Yeah,
and
but
so this planet like nailed that.
are weird. Planets are weird.
Planets.
Yeah,
Planets are weird, right?
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
shout out to
And
movie
it-
Bob.
And then what the coolest part is to see Taz in action here. See,
well, sorry, that's to stop it there, Ricardo. It's Case actually. Taz stays back,
Case
right?
was here, right? Sorry,
When
Case is
boy,
right, no problem.
Case roll he way to save Amelia. No, I was like, what?
Yeah, that's pretty badass.
But it's how it looks, and then especially when you hear mountains, that piece of music, and you see that rolling action, there's something about that's just so amazing to me, though. It's like on some artsy kind of shit, though. Like it is a filming.
When the action started beat up, and they hear pum 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 pum, and they hear the strings come in, and it's like,
yeah.
And it's like, all right, you know that shit.
Yeah, and then there's a moment where he picks her up and runs, but it looked like he's running, but he's actually like sliding. But it's just how it
what
looked.
cool about it is it's like the lolocomotion of like a horse now.
Yes.
Again, the locomotion. I don't know. I have no idea if this is actually work, but it feels plausible. That's again, Mr. Christopher Nolan is great at aesthetics. The aesthetics of realism.
Yes.
That thing really looked like it could have worked, John.
Yes.
Like you're watching this thing, like you feel like, oh, now somebody gonna invent that in like 25 years or whatever. Like, yeah, it feel like that because it's him clearly pulling from NASA, or wherever it is, right? Like it's him taking something, pulling from NASA, blah blah blah, normal thing. But he does a really good job of setting this thing up as the puppet. You can't forget. I remember seeing the behind the scenes with the puppetry and whatever it is. I look great.
Right, I should actually look up that. I forgot the mechanics behind it, right? But yeah, you're right, guys. That sequence is like one of the best probably the best in the entire film, and just so incredibly tense. Kind of, and yes, you're right. Well, one of the astronauts, that'll be Doyle, actually dies, and they kind of set up early on that he could be or probably is Amelia's love interest, but like he does die.
Right. Well, you learn later who that is actually. But
right. Exactly. Which you'll get into, right? But yeah, CC. Yeah, you're about to say before we get to that moment.
No, I was about to say this sequence, and I'm as someone who has a love-hate relationship with Hollywood. Sometimes it depends on the output in a given year. If you are a young filmmaker, this is how you do an exciting set piece. This is how you do action without violence, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, you don't have to, like, yes, we all love, like, I think everyone on this podcast is a Jet Li fan. We all love people getting punched about. But
Ricardo and I grew up on Jet Li, just saying.
Exactly.
Exactly. That's the run every month.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chinese food, Chinese movie.
Yep. Yeah. So,
right. But at the same time, it is so refreshing to see a film where, like it's so refreshing. It's absolutely refreshing to see a movie where it's a film that's light on action set pieces in the more traditional people shooting guns or punching each other type way. But when you are on Miller's planet and you know that they cannot afford to mess around, they cannot afford to lose time. And you hear the clock ticking in Hans Zimmer's score, and you see that giant wave bearing down on them. It is exhilarating. It is absolutely exhilarating, and it's one of the things that makes this film so special is the fact that it's so creative in all the different ways that it finds to create it's in the ways it finds to create spectacle, all those ways to create excitement and to create all this other stuff. And this sequence is probably one of the best examples of that in the whole movie. Like, my God.